Tonight on Bridge City News, the owner of a house which blew up in North Lethbridge speaks out about how he lost everything. There is a church in Lethbridge which is helping the needy, one vegetable at a time. And the search for 2 BC teenagers suspected in the killing of 3 people has now led police to York Landing in Manitoba.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. We can all say we've been taken advantage of when trying to help out a friend or family member. But how many can say that they've had their house blown up? That's exactly what happened to Brian Beekman on Friday afternoon. Video journalist Naveen Day has the story.
Doing a good deed resulted in a total loss of his house and belongings. Brian Beekman says he let a friend and his girlfriend move into his garage only hours before a series of explosions took his house and everything in it.
Sean and his girlfriend just finished moving in at about 5 in the morning. And I didn't see anything in the garage. I gave them their privacy. They had the windows covered to the door to the garage. And yeah, me and a buddy were having a beer downstairs. Asked his girlfriend, Sean's girlfriend, if she wanted to come have a beer with us. And 5 minutes after she came down, there was an explosion. And that's when we rushed up the stairs to see the whole garage engulfed in flames. And we smelled a really bad chemical smell, not something that is like propane or like gas, but something that might be used to cook drugs with.
Beekman lost a leg and arm 9 years ago when he was hit by a taxi driver while he was cycling. His wheelchair and prosthetic leg were left behind in the fire while he managed to climb out of his basement while it was burning down around him.
My prosthetic leg, I lost that. That was 80 to 90,000 just for that. I just got brand new couches. Those are gone. Even the other sectional that I had, gone. All my electronics, my TV, my stereo, clothes, like everything, it's gone.
Fundraising campaigns have started to help Beekman purchase new mobility equipment and amenities. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
The sounds of hip-hop and the smell of food trucks fill the atmosphere today at Gold Gardens. Hip Hop for Healing, which is a program run by Arches, gives local musicians an opportunity to record their own tracks. The musicians came out to share their lyrical talents.
Hip Hop for Healing is an event that we organized to help give our clients who have been recording with us a chance to get out and get their stories and voices heard in the community, and to help build bridges between them and other artists in the local music community, because it's very important for artists to be able to access that network and be able to get on with promoters, and a lot of it comes down to shaking hands with people. So this is a good opportunity for everybody to come together and mingle. Hip hop is a very inclusive community that shows love for everybody, and so it's good to see we've got people from all walks of life out here celebrating with us.
The performances go until 7 o'clock tonight, and admission is free. David and Colette Steffen returned to the Lethbridge Courthouse for week 8 of their retrial. The couple was originally convicted of failing to provide the necessaries of life to their 19-month-old son Ezekiel in 2012, who died of meningitis. The conviction was upheld by the Court of Appeal, but the Supreme Court of Canada ordered a new trial. Video journalist Naveen Day is at the courthouse. Nav, what's the latest?
Thanks, Hal. Questioning continued today for Dr. Bamidele Adiegbo, this time in person. Dr. Adiegbo was the chief medical examiner who performed the autopsy in Ezekiel. He says the child died of bacterial meningitis. While on the stand, he was presented with findings from a report from Dr. Annie Savageau, another chief medical officer. She says Ezekiel had died not of bacterial meningitis, but of lack of oxygen to the brain for 20 minutes while the child was being transported in an ambulance that was not equipped with proper breathing apparatus. Adiegbo argues that 20 minutes was an overstated amount of time where Ezekiel went without oxygen because it did not take into account that CPR was being performed on the toddler prior to being picked up by the ambulance. The trial is expected to wrap up by the end of August. Back to you, Hal.
That was video journalist Naveen Day reporting from the Lethbridge Courthouse. 'Tis the season to get a green thumb. As more and more people like to spend their summers in the garden, one church has built a community garden to help those in need. Via Church in Lethbridge is currently serving about 30 to 40 families who do not have access to or cannot afford fresh produce. The garden is completely volunteer-run and has an educational component to it.
We're hoping to teach them how to use fresh produce because lots of people don't know, right? People who have grown up without access to that kind of stuff. So hoping to serve them with even learning how to do the basics with the produce.
Yeah, so we've got lots of potatoes, zucchini, carrots, beans, peas, cabbage, tomatoes, corn.
When people come in and they're hungry, we have food hampers that we give out normally, and it's usually just the normal like canned goods, dry, pantry stuff. We also have women in the church who make meals, and so if there's a family who comes in and they're in need, we have some home cooked meals as well that we can give out from time to time. But the produce, anybody could come to the church and say they were hungry and we would give it. It's not based on money.
Via Church also has a school bus they're filling with hampers of clothing to give those who are also in need. Some of the world's future LPGA stars teed off in Lethbridge today to practice for the Canadian Girls Golf Championship. Now, this is the first time the event has ever been held in Lethbridge. Ainsley O'Reilly explains how much this means for one local golfer and her competitors.
It's Alana Makarchuk's first time competing at the Junior Women's National Golf Championship, and she's lucky enough to be teeing off on home turf. The Tabor Golf Club has become a little bit of a fan club.
Our ladies league and men's league are all super pumped that I've made it this far, and some of them are closely tracking my scores, and just it's been great going back to the golf course and hearing everyone's support. It's great because last year it was in BC, and even that was a bit of a hike because it was in the middle of nowhere, but here just being an hour drive away from Tabor, it's really nice.
Alberta's provincial champions are just as pumped to play close to home.
Because that's the first time that it's happened throughout my junior golf career, because I played my first nationals when I was 13, but since then it's never been in Alberta, so finally it is, and it's kind of home, so it's awesome.
And I know a lot of the girls here because it's everyone from Alberta, and it's cool that new people are coming as well.
Last year's winner, Celeste Dow, is from Montreal, and it's her first time in Alberta.
I really like it. It's similar to Arizona, this course, I feel. So, and it's pretty weather and a good forecast for the rest of the week, so I'm pretty excited to spend my week here.
Today was just practice. The competition begins tomorrow at 6:15 a.m. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
A couple in their 80s died after their vehicle collided with a tractor trailer near Coaldale on Saturday night. RCMP say the senior Chevy Equinox was hit broadside by the truck at the intersection of Highway 4 and Range Road 205. The two, who were from Tabor, were pronounced dead at the scene. Members of an Alberta gliding club gathered last night to remember two of their own lost in a crash on Friday. 68-year-old Alan Wood and his 18-year-old student Adam Lineweber were in a glider that collided with a tow plane shortly after release. The accident occurred near Black Diamond. The president of the gliding club, Carrie Stevenson, says Lineweber was a budding pilot. The club has shut down operations until a later date. A traffic stop by Blood Tribe Police led to the arrest of a man and 14 charges being laid. Authorities say the driver, 29-year-old Kyle Pace, was arrested on outstanding warrants. Police found a loaded semi-automatic rifle in his vehicle, along with crack cocaine, magic mushrooms, a retractable baton, brass knuckles, several electronics, and over 200 rounds of ammunition. Pace appeared in Cardston Provincial Court earlier today, answering to the charges. A weekend wildfire prompted the evacuation of a hamlet in the southeastern part of the province. Cypress Fire Services battled the flames that burned south of the Trans-Canada Highway and threatened the hamlet of Walsh. Strong winds at the time fanned flames and reduced visibility. Cypress County declared a local state of emergency. A Calgary City Councillor who says the city needs more time to look at the tentative arena deal will be voting against it. Jeremy Farkas says the money would be better spent on other city projects. The City and Calgary Sports and Entertainment Group announced a deal last week that would see the groups equally split the cost of the new $550 million arena that would replace the Saddle Dome. Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi defended the deal. He said it won't lead to new development by itself, but will help some of the development get built a lot quicker. The search for two BC teenagers wanted in connection with 3 killings continues in northern Manitoba. A tweet from the Manitoba RCMP say their efforts are now focused on the York Landing region as they receive tips that Briar Schmigelski and Cam McLeod are there. York Landing is about 200 kilometers west of Gillam and is only accessible by air or a 2-hour ferry.
Based on the information received, the RCMP immediately deployed multiple resources to the community. Officers searched the York Landing area throughout the night and continue their efforts today. The Royal Canadian Air Force is also assisting today with the search. Our officers are on the ground, have not made contact with the individuals, and so we are not yet in a position to confirm that these are the wanted suspects.
Police are asking residents to stay in their homes and keep the doors locked as the two suspects are considered dangerous. Schmigelski and McLeod remain at large despite a 6-day manhunt and more than 200 tips from the public. Sometimes stories come across our desks at BCN that make you just shake your head. A man who is legally blind walked into a gas station in British Columbia recently with his guide dog and was ordered to get out of the store by the clerk, since dogs, including guide dogs, were not allowed inside. Criminal defense lawyer Ari Goldkind has the details.
Ben goes into a gas station, wants to buy a bottle of water. The clerk says, no pets allowed. Ben says, this isn't a pet, it's my harnessed guide dog, full service card, the whole thing. He's told, get out of here. He says, I'm not going, I'd like to buy my bottle of water. He's completely blind. Let's be clear now. We're not talking about a giraffe. We're not talking about a service pigeon. We're talking about the actual full Monty of blind man's guide dog. The clerk says, I'm going to call the police if you don't get out of here.
Ari will have more on that bizarre case coming up in the second half of our show. York Regional Police say a man is in custody after officers located the bodies of 4 people inside of a house in Markham, Ontario.
And the information that we had received was that there was possibly 4 people injured inside that residence. When our officers got here, they were met by a man, a 20-year-old man, who was taken into custody at the front door of the residence. Our officers then went inside the residence, and that's where they discovered the bodies of 4 people deceased inside the residence. At this point in time, we're seeking any information from any residents in the area that may have seen or heard anything throughout the afternoon today. Again, we got that call around 3:00 p.m. and we're seeking any information that anyone might have. We also want to reassure the community here, I know there's a lot of people here from the neighborhood, that we do have somebody in custody, a 20-year-old man, and he remains in custody as this is an ongoing investigation.
Menhaz Zaman is facing 4 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of the 3 women and 1 man. A gunman cut through a fence to avoid security and opened fire at a festival in Gilroy, California, killing 3, including a 6-year-old boy, and wounding at least 15 others. Police ended up shooting and killing the gunman.
There were reports of shooting on the north side of the Garlic Festival. Officers were in that area and engaged the suspect in less than a minute. The suspect was shot and killed.
It just started popping off like fireworks. It sounded like firecrackers. That's what I thought it was. I had no idea until he grabbed me and he started pulling me and telling me, that's gunfire. We need to get out of here. Go, run.
I saw this guy that was that looked like it was a sheriff, and I thought he hit the trigger by accident, right? But when I saw him loading the gun and pointing at everybody, that's when I knew he was in the police.
The gunman has been identified as Santino William Legan. U.S. President Donald Trump offered condolences to the families of those killed by the gunman. The president condemned the actions of the wicked murderer.
We express our deepest sadness and sorrow for the families who lost a precious loved one in the horrific shooting last night in Gilroy, California. While families were spending time together at a local festival, a wicked murderer opened fire and killed 3 innocent citizens, including a young child. We grieve for their families, and we ask that God will comfort them with His overflowing mercy and grace. We're praying for those who are recovering right now in the hospital.
Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, protests for democracy continue to escalate. Police repeatedly fired tear gas and rubber bullets to drive back protesters blocking the streets last night. Chaotic scenes filled several blocks in the western part of Hong Kong. The demonstrators are demanding the resignation of the territory's leader and an investigation into police use of force to quell earlier protests. 2 people working for a Canadian gold mining company, Banro, are among 4 people kidnapped in eastern Congo. The army believes a South African, a Zimbabwean, and 2 Congolese were taken by rebels who operate in that area. So far, the kidnappers have not made any ransom demands. The persecution of Christians continues in many countries around the world, including Egypt. The Leading the Way founder, Dr. Michael Youssef, shared his insight into what is happening in his home country of Egypt and how the local media there is playing a role in helping Christians.
The persecution doesn't come from the president, doesn't come from his office, doesn't come from his cabinet, doesn't come from the government at all. It comes from little pockets, remote pockets in different provinces of Egypt, not even in Cairo in many ways. And now these debates about Christianity and freedom in the secular media in Egypt, they talk about it openly. They invite Christians to come and speak about persecution and where it is, and then they really are the secular media in the Middle East supportive of Christians when they do seek human rights, in the sense when the elements of persecutions take place, whether it be in government or in companies or even in the soccer players, where Christians are not having a fair shake there. And now these problems are at the forefront. They never used to be. There were holes hidden behind the scene, nobody talked about them. But thank God for the secular media in the Middle East, they're talking about these issues.
Ethiopians may set a new world record today by planting more than 224 million trees. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia is on a mission to restore his country's landscape, which experts say is now less than 4% forested due to deforestation. Reports that Ethiopia aims to plant 4 billion trees by the end of October. That is a lot of trees. We had lots of sunshine today, and if you love those hot temperatures, good news, it'll be sticking around for a little while. Complete weather details are on deck. We've had quite a bit of sunshine over the past few days, sunny and hot again today. Tonight, mainly clear with a low near 11. Sunshine and 31 expected for both Tuesday and Wednesday. Even warmer on Thursday with a high expected near 32. Friday, blue sky and sunshine and 31. It should be cooling off slightly for the weekend. Expect a high near 28 on Saturday, 27 degrees on Sunday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 26 and an average low of 11. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 2007 at 37 degrees, and the record low was 4 in 1963. Sunrise was at 5:57, sunset at 9:18. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Expect a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 22 in Victoria. Slightly warmer at 24 degrees for Vancouver. A chance of thunder showers at 27 in Calgary tomorrow. A 60% chance of rain at 24 for Edmonton. Just a few clouds at 27 is on tap for Regina. Mainly cloudy and 29 for Saskatoon on Tuesday. It should be mainly sunny at 26 degrees in Winnipeg. Toronto and Ottawa both had a heat warning today. Tomorrow a chance of rain and a high near 26 for both cities. Even warmer with rain at 29 degrees for Montreal. Over the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have a few clouds and 32. Halifax, Nova Scotia will have light showers and 31. Charlottetown, PEI will be mainly cloudy and 30. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect clouds and showers and a high near 24 degrees tomorrow. Ticket sales to concerts and other events are being discontinued by Kijiji Canada. The company says it is taking this step because the shift from physical to digital tickets has created too much fraud. It also says tickets can be an emotional purchase that can lead to rushed decisions. Kijiji Canada cut the option to sell tickets as of today, but listings already posted will stay up until they expire. There's been a lot of talk lately of banning single-use plastics, especially by the Trudeau Liberals. Richard Friesen with Friesen Plastics says plastics can be useful in many ways, including using them as a fuel source.
Sweden has 34 electricity generating plants that are fueled by garbage, and a lot of that garbage would be plastic. And the incinerators heat up boilers, and the boilers turn the turbines, and they're producing a fair percentage of electricity just from burning garbage.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Friesen as we discuss the long-term impact of potentially banning plastics coming up after business news. Pfizer is buying generic pharmaceutical company Mylan in an all-stock deal worth $10 billion US. Pfizer plans to combine the company with its own off-patent branded and generic business called Upjohn. It makes Lipitor, Celebrex, and Viagra, while Mylan is best known for its EpiPen, an injector used to halt life-threatening allergic reactions. The deal arrives at a precarious time for big drug makers who are threatened by patent protection losses and lower-priced rivals. New British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is pushing Britain closer to a no-deal exit from the European Union. He says he will not hold Brexit talks with EU leaders unless the bloc backs off its refusal to reopen the existing divorce deal. Meanwhile, the British pound has fallen to new two-year lows as business groups warn that neither Britain nor the EU is ready for a no-deal Brexit. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, a couple in their 80s died after their vehicle collided with a tractor trailer near Coaldale on Saturday night. RCMP say the senior Chevy Equinox was hit broadside by the truck at the intersection of Highway 4 and Range Road 205. The two, who were from Tabor, were pronounced dead at the scene. A blind man and his guide dog were both apparently ordered out of a gas station in Kamloops, BC. What led up to that point? Criminal defense lawyer Ari Goldkind has the story next. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Wide Skies Music and Arts Festival is returning to downtown Lethbridge July 30th and 31st. Day 1 is a block party beginning at 5 p.m. at 11th Street South between 3rd and 4th Avenue. It will feature live music, public art, vendors, food trucks, and more. Day 2 features a free outdoor pop-up performance downtown and an event at the Casa Stage at Rotary Square. For festival passes, individual tickets, and other details, visit wideskiesmusicfest.org. Southern Alberta Men's Ministry is hosting a barbecue and games day for men in the Lethbridge area on Saturday, August 24th at the John Martin Picnic Area in Pavan Park beginning at 4 p.m. Enjoy an afternoon of hilarious fun and delicious food. Then hear an inspiring message from Jerry Pullman. Tickets are 2 for $10. Buy one for yourself and a friend. For more information and tickets, contact Leslie at 403-327-4422 and follow Southern Alberta Men's Ministry on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Gem of the West Museum in Coaldale is hosting an open house on Heritage Day, August 5th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Take in ice cream making, crafts for the kids, a scavenger hunt, and more. It's fun for the whole family and admission is by donation. For details, visit gemofthewest.ca. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Canadians want to get tough on drunk drivers, but recently a judge decided that a young driver 3 times over the legal limit will not even have a criminal record. Joining me now to talk about this and other big issues is criminal defense lawyer Ari Goldkind, joining me once again from Toronto. Ari, an Ontario judge, has struck down the mandatory minimum sentence for first-time impaired driving in the case of an Indigenous woman, basing his decision on issues like colonialism and racism. How does that even work?
So, Hal, this is a really, really troubling decision that should bother Canadians all across this land, not just in Toronto where this decision came out of. So I'm going to use a Seinfeld line, not that there's anything wrong with that us lawyers have to say when we're about to tear apart a judge's decision. Judge Paul Burstein is a lovely guy. I know him. He's thoughtful. He's well respected. He's a former defense lawyer. This decision, despite that caveat, is terrible. He goes through all sorts of reasons for people who don't know, there is a minimum punishment in the criminal code, and the minimum punishment is what's called a criminal record. He said, I'm going to call that imposition of a criminal record on this young lady who was so drunk as a skunk, people should know that, 3 times over the legal limit. He viewed her having a criminal record as, and I'm quoting now, cruel and unusual punishment, end quote. The idea in our society in Canada that somebody, even if they're Aboriginal or Indigenous, even if there's fetal alcohol involved, even if there's colonialism or all these other hot button political issues that we're not going to debate today, the idea that when you got behind the wheel, you're going to essentially get a free pass from a judge because her lawyer very skillfully and ably played the Indigenous sort of get out of criminal record card. It is something that even as a defense lawyer, while I'm jealous of the result, I think the result is absolutely terrible. And if I was Mothers Against Drunk Driving today, I would be spinning in the proverbial graves of all of those who have been killed by drunk drivers and all of those who haven't because the drunk driver was lucky enough to make it home without plowing into somebody.
Could and would a judge ever apply the Gladue principle to a white person who happened to grow up in a family that had a long history of substance abuse and similar broken family issues?
Amazingly, no. And this is the problem with our criminal justice system, that just like our political system has become obsessed with race, religion, identity, hashtags, white privilege, other groups who have no privilege. We've stopped looking at the human, we've stopped looking at the act, and we've essentially brought Twitter into the courtroom. And in my view, particularly when the criminal code is extraordinarily gentle on drunk drivers, they don't go to jail for a first offense. But if you're unlucky enough to hit somebody, then you're going to jail. What does it matter if you're lucky or unlucky enough that there's a little girl or a little boy in the roadway where you're driving like a mad person, sauced up? So if you're a white person who comes from a far worse background, or a black person, or a Muslim, or a Jew who has 500 more excuses than this young woman, you are not going to get a pass like Judge Burstein gave to this woman. So with all due respect to him, I understand not hammering Aboriginal people for certain kinds of crimes, but to say this is cruel and unusual punishment, it's a terrible precedent, and how I expect it to be overturned at the Court of Appeal.
Ben Fulton, a blind man, entered a gas station in Kamloops, British Columbia with his guide dog, and the attendant demanded that he remove the dog from the premises and then called the police when the blind man refused. Can you share more on the story, Ari?
I sure can, Hal, because wink, wink, nudge, nudge, just between you and me, Ben Fulton happens to be my articling student. And I hired him, and nobody knows this, but you're going to be the first to hear it because I've kept myself out of the story, but now I'm going to put myself in. I hired this man 1 year ago because nobody would give him a break because of the obstacles he has in life, going through life as a fully blind person. Now, truth be told, I hired his guide dog, Abby, but he has to bring Abby to court and to work with me, so I have to take Ben as I find him. But what happened in BC is no joke. And just for people who don't know, I'll give it to you in 30 seconds. Ben goes into a gas station, wants to buy a bottle of water. The clerk says, no pets allowed. Ben says, this isn't a pet, it's my harnessed guide dog, full service card, the whole thing. He's told, get out of here. He says, I'm not going. I'd like to buy my bottle of water. He's completely blind. Let's be clear now. We're not talking about a giraffe. We're not talking about a service pigeon. We're talking about the actual full Monty of blind man's guide dog. The clerk says, I'm going to call the police if you don't get out of here. My student says, please do, because what's the first thing Ben is thinking? Well, if the police come, they're going to know the law, and they're going to tell this clerk, I have as much right to be here as every pack of gum and Snapple in here. The police come, and here's where the story becomes terrible. The police forcibly ask him to leave. He doesn't. He says, I don't understand why I'd have to leave. They then put the cuffs on him, arrest him arrest him. Now picture this. He's standing with his guide dog. They put the cuffs on him and arrest him. They then put him in the back of a cop car for 20 minutes until they realize what the heck they've done. They then release him. And when they're asked about it on major network news over the last 2 weeks, the ridiculous spokesperson for the RCMP, this is her answer. Ready? Ready for this? We weren't sure he was blind. We didn't know because we didn't see the dog. This is the RCMP, ladies and gentlemen, so I can assure you, My office is pursuing this. The Shell gas station gave a completely proper response. This should never have happened. We're looking into it. We want to get the footage. This is a disgrace of national proportions, especially if, like me, Hal, you're somebody that hates all these people trotting out the I'm disabled card. I do this, I'm that. Ben is the real deal. And for our National Police Service, sorry for the rant, but for our National Police Service to handcuff him, put him in the back of a cop car, and keep him there without his dog is so disgraceful to me. I don't know where to begin, but now I will take my indignation and I'll go back to my happy self. Next question.
I can see a big payout coming from Mr. Fulton. Let me ask you something, Ari. Legally speaking, was Mr. Fulton breaking the law when he refused to go outside at the request of police?
So first of all, let's go into the law. No, he's absolutely not. They have no authority. They have no grounds to what's called in law detain him. He's not committed any offense. He's not suspected to commit any offense. And in my view, Hal, and I mean this seriously, by cuffing him and arresting him and taking him out of there, they've actually assaulted him because they've acted without lawful authority. The arrest is without lawful authority. He's improperly detained. They had no business to take him out. And just to bring listeners, viewers right into this, they charge him with mischief. And anybody who's obsessed with their cell phone as much as I and most people are, just Google mischief and see if any of the definitions of mischief, it's only 4 lines, it's not a surprise, you don't have to go to law school. It is such a bogus charge that they conjured up on the spot that it's disgusting. And for me, who sees the way Ben conducts himself, such a respectful person, you imagine walking through life with both your eyes closed or a bag over your head and understand his life and think when your police service shows up to serve and protect you, they treated him like a piece of garbage, and the RCMP should be ashamed of themselves.
Now, speaking of the police, Ari, many police departments have their officers wear body cams. However, some police departments are choosing not to wear body cams. Why is that?
So that's an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I actually ran for political office 5 years ago. People don't know that, in a very successful campaign in Toronto. And one of the hubs of that was that all police officers in Toronto and across Canada should be wearing body cameras. Now, why does that matter? 2 reasons. One, when a cop is wearing a body camera, and just think this through in terms of if you, when you were arguing with your spouse, if you knew you were being video recorded, or when you're driving home and you're thinking of giving somebody the finger, but you think it's going to end up on YouTube, it modernizes and governs your behavior. It minimizes your level of rage. It makes you think twice. So for police officers who are dealing with various and sundry people, often people who are obstinate and terrible, it makes a police officer dial down and seek to de-escalate. That's reason number 1, and that's very important for trust in the community. Reason number 2, and this is the part that only the Calgary Police Department gets right. They're the one department in Canada that has actually understood this. When cops are wearing body cameras, Hal, it actually 9 times out of 10, when some idiot civilian says the cops were too rough, or they beat me up, or they were disrespectful to me, as soon as the footage comes out, the footage shows that the cops are in the right. So while cops are hesitating and fudging all this, the proof in the pudding is that body cameras, by and large, when they're on, they're activated, they're worn on the lapel, just for people to understand, they actually exonerate cops 9 times out of 10.
Ayanli Hassan Ali was found not criminally responsible after he attacked several uniformed military personnel with a large knife back in March of 2016. Ari, a judge granted Ali permission to attend college unaccompanied while detained at a secure Hamilton hospital. That decision was appealed, and the appeal court held up the ruling. Now, is this fair to those who were sitting with Ali in class?
So this is something I've been talking about in the last 2 weeks, where we have really tipped the balance. And again, full disclosure, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. In court, I would be arguing this man's position. But just because I advocate something in court doesn't mean it's a view I share. Nobody should think that things said in court reflect the advocate who's saying it. The idea that if I had a child who goes to Mohawk College, that's the name of the school in Ontario, and they were to find out a man who through religious affiliations, let's just be politically correct, and mental health issues. It was the combination of both as found by the court. But most mentally ill people don't have a certain religious affiliation where they go into a military office to stab somebody up. The idea that if I have a child there, this man who left untreated is still a ticking time bomb, should be sitting next to my child when my child is at school to be educated and to be in a safe space. To me, that is a balancing of rights that is way too much to somebody who's mentally ill and way too little to the community. The Court of Appeal didn't step in for a legal reason that's a little bit boring. Suffice it to say their reasons were the Ontario Review Board considered everything properly, so we're not going to substitute our decision for theirs. But if you're a parent in this community, you are really wondering why and for whom the criminal justice system or the mental health system exists if kids, and remember, we're talking teenagers, young people, are left with a man like this who could snap at any time.
This situation has a lot of similarities with the recent case of a hospital patient detained for killing his roommate. He also was found not criminally responsible, and he fled during an unaccompanied trip in the community, and then he managed to flee the country back to China. Should mentally ill patients be allowed back into the community?
So here's an answer that will bother a lot of people. The answer is absolutely yes, 100%. And this story has been told very poorly across a whole series of outlets. And here's what it is. And by the way, you know who Doug Ford is. And Doug Ford sort of set this off by saying, guys like this should be locked up and throw the key away forever. Now, for Paul Bernardo, that makes sense. But when you're a schizophrenic person and you're off your medication, you're in the community untreated, and people should understand in Canada how bad counseling and treatment is for mentally ill people until they do something horrible. Remember, until they do something horrible. Here's the point. If this man, his name is Zeben Kong, never got on that flight to China, we would not be talking about this. Why? He should have been flagged at the airport. The disgrace here is that he made it through all the security checks at an airport. You and I, Hal, if we were on a flight together to go somewhere, they're going to take away our sunscreen. They're going to take away our yogurt and granola because we've got a 5-hour flight, and they're making us take off our stupid shoes and belts. It's this facade of security. The idea that he makes it through Pearson Airport in Toronto, that's the disgrace of the story. The part that isn't being told is he's been in the community for many months doing extremely well. And for people in a mental hospital who are doing extremely well, you do increase their privileges. So the moral of the story here is it's border security and police forces that should have a lot of explaining to do, not the mental health system, even though I appreciate that a lot of Canadians agree with Doug Ford and say, just get rid of these people and lock them up in a mental institution forever.
Ari, the NDP has come out with a very interesting proposal. Make all adults potential organ donors unless they opt out. Are there any legal issues with what is known as presumed consent?
There are some interesting ones, and as somebody who, shall we say, Hal, I'm putting this mildly, is not a fan of the NDP, this is a really, really good motion by them. It's really important. First things first, before we get to the legalities. About 90% of Canadians, Hal, support organ donation if you die or if you're on death's door in a hospital. And remember, that's the time that the organ has to be harvested. Now, you couldn't get 90% of Canadians to agree that the sun rises in the east. So imagine that 90% of Canadians agree on this. But here's the problem. Only about 20% of Canadians or so, depending on the province, fill out the card that allows that consent. So what the NDP has done is say, we're going to reverse that. We're going to have an opt-out policy. I personally think it's an extremely positive move. There are those that don't like it because Canada is so multicultural now that certain religions won't love it. Well, who cares? I mean, the idea that that's going to trump the savings of lives should not matter. There are legal issues for children, and obviously who's going to be making those decisions, or somebody opting or changing their mind at the last moment, or a family member stepping in. But if you look at this as sort of somebody's last will and testament while they're sort of healthy and able to make that choice, it's a very, very good motion from the NDP. And here's a message I would say to people who oppose it. And by the way, Hal, the government of Singapore has addressed this issue. Now, what does Singapore have to do with this? I don't want to take their idea and pretend it's mine. But Singapore's position is simple. If you opt out of organ donation, and God forbid one day you need an organ, you go to the very back of the organ donation line. That is what we should have in Canada, and I say the NDP are to be commended for this.
Ari Goldkind, Toronto criminal defense lawyer and media commentator, thanks a lot for your time today.
Thank you, sir.
There have been all kinds of demands from environmentalists and political leaders to ban single-use plastics in Canada. The reasoning is that this is necessary to save the planet. But will a plastic ban actually make things better or worse? We thought it might be good to hear from the other side of the issue. Joining me now is Richard Friesen, who's a business owner involved in producing plastics for over 20 years, and he lives right here in Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News, Richard.
Thank you.
Okay, a lot of grocery stores are talking, bottom line, we're getting rid of the plastic bags, bringing in paper bags. Is that a good idea?
No, quite frankly, it's a rather bad idea. It's totally the wrong approach. Plastic was invented, thank goodness, to take away a lot of the problems that there were with paper bags. First of all, the cost. Plastic is substantially cheaper. A plastic bag is substantially cheaper to produce, and believe it or not, the environmental impact is a lot less with plastic than it is with paper. Most people think of paper, it's a paper bag, but look at where it came from. It came from a forest somewhere, and there was a big piece of diesel machinery that had to take the tree down, and then it's transported. Again, there's a fair bit of transportation, and then off to a pulp mill. And pulp mills are always located close to a water source. So there's a lot of water used in the production of paper. Every time when you look at a paper mill, you'll see the big smokestacks, and there's a lot of smoke going up in those stacks. And
aren't you saving trees at the same time too if you go plastic instead of paper?
We're saving trees. Trees suck up CO2 and produce oxygen, and so the cost is significantly more when you take the entire footprint into consideration. To make plastic, you open a tap and you siphon off a byproduct of natural gas. Most of the bags, or virtually all the bags in the food industry, are made from either polyethylene or polypropylene, and both are byproducts of natural gas.
How about transporting as well? Is paper more expensive than plastic?
Transportation, right, it's a good point. One truckload of plastic bags, or I should say a truckload of plastic bags can carry the same amount as 7 truckloads of paper bags. So that's, there again, the transportation costs are 7 times more when it comes to paper versus plastic.
But how about breaking down in a landfill? That's where a lot of people have concerns. It's like, it's not biodegradable. Where the paper is, I think that's where a lot of environmentalists have their concerns.
A lot of landfills are not healthy landfills. They don't necessarily, in some landfills nothing breaks down. You can dig into a landfill that's not working properly, and you'll read newsprint from the 60s. And actually, in a landfill, plastic is probably one of the safest items in the landfill. When the plastic, if it doesn't degrade, well, no harm done, because there are no toxins in plastic bags used in the food industry, and that is why we can put food into these bags. We can put bread into a bread bag, and there's nothing will leach into the bread.
But how about actually burning the plastics? Do we release toxins into the atmosphere that way?
If plastic is burned properly, incinerated properly at a high enough temperature, and the smokestacks are properly built, designed, there's very, very little gases going into the atmosphere. Whereas in a landfill, we got to remember, also produces greenhouse gases. And so if that's true, incineration does produce some greenhouse gases, but the fuel that is in plastics makes an excellent source of energy for a generating plant.
You know what's interesting too is how some of the fast food restaurants you go to now, they have paper straws. instead of plastic straws. You know, we've got to get rid of all those plastic straws. And I've, you know, used the paper straws, and it's already disintegrating. I know it's from the acid, whatever, within the pop itself or the soda in my mouth, and I can taste the paper. Where you don't have that, that's not necessarily the case with plastic. So is it worth it? Maybe we should continue with paper straws for the environment, but
no, well,
like it's already breaking down in my mouth as I'm drinking my drink.
Right, that's a problem. I've noticed that too. What of course it's a target because somebody shows a picture of a plastic drinking straw sticking in coming out of the nostril of a sea turtle, and that is unfortunate. But in Canada, we don't dump our plastic into the ocean. There are countries, particularly in Asia, where plastic does get dumped in the waters and it ends up in the oceans. But in Canada, it does not have that problem, and so this is a total overreaction.
Richard, let's go back to plastic bags for just a moment here. And what's interesting, a lot of people believe that plastic bags are made from oil, the oil energy sector. But that's not really the case, is it?
Not in Alberta. In Alberta, I believe virtually all of the plastic, especially polyethylene and polypropylene, are manufactured from ethylene, a byproduct of natural gas. We're not going to be replacing natural gas for our heating, our houses, and so natural gas will probably be used for a long time. And if we don't use the byproduct to make plastic, we'll probably just burn it off. And that happens to unwanted gases are usually just burned off. And we haven't really accomplished anything.
Some environmentalists and politicians want to see us, you know, ban plastics altogether, like get rid of plastics. But I'm thinking to myself, we have plastics in our electronics, toys, car parts, the wheels on this desk here, you know, where we're doing the interview.
Exactly.
It's just about in everything. So what's the alternative?
You know, that's, I guess, turning the clock back to 1950. That would be one alternative. We had very little plastic back then. Because I don't really think there aren't economical alternatives to much of what we're using. Car parts, for example, a lot of them were made out of steel in the early days of the automobile, and that, of course, with them going to plastic, it has lightened the cars substantially. The cars would be twice the weight they are now if it wasn't for the plastic.
Now, I've heard there are also biodegradable plastic bags. Would they be something maybe environmentalists could get behind?
If it has the word plastic in it, it's tough to get an environmentalist behind it. But there are, in certain applications, biodegradable products can be used. One problem with biodegradable bags would be a time limit. If they start degrading too soon, they're generally not used in the food for food storage, but for other uses, garbage bags, our company produces biodegradable plastic.
Well, that's great. Tell me about that whole process, from the concept all the way to completion when it hits the store shelves.
Our plant produces plastic from plastic resin, and again, the resin is, for a plastic bag, it would be the same kind of resin that you would use to make Tupperware. Everybody's quite comfortable with using Tupperware to store food, and that is what plastic bags are made of, polyethylene. Okay. At least our bags. And if they're for a bakery or a produce shipper, they will get printed. And so we print the plastic, and then the plastic rolls of printed plastic rolls get put through a bagging machine, and bags are made according to whatever the customer specifications. And then after they're packaged, they usually go to a central distribution place, probably in Calgary, and then shipped throughout Western Canada.
Who are some of your biggest clients? Do you ship like across Canada and the United States, maybe to Asia?
Most of our, no, we wouldn't be shipping anything out of or nothing to Asia, but our biggest customer base is Western Canada.
Have the restaurant owners told you, said, listen, we're going away from plastics? We're going to be going with someone else?
No, we haven't had information like that. We haven't had requests like that, no.
So if a plastic ban was implemented, especially with single-use plastics, you know, the water bottles, the knives and forks, what's the financial cost to the consumer?
There definitely, it'll increase the cost will be passed on to the consumer, and I don't know what it would be in terms of dollars, but at a time when we want to look for more efficient ways of doing everything else, why would we pick on something as useful as plastic storage and say, hey, we're going to ban it and go to something more expensive? It just doesn't make sense. We should continually look for efficiencies, and by turning the clock back, going to paper, that is not in the best interest of the consumer at all.
And aren't the plastic bags stronger too than a lot of the paper bags for holding groceries?
For weight, yes, for sure. Paper. The problem with reusing a paper bag, for example, is the chances are the second time you'll use it, it'll tear. And plastic definitely has per weight, it is substantially stronger.
How about recycling initiatives? I know some cities, they don't like to recycle the plastic bags. That's why they end up in the landfill. Where with paper bags, you know, it's a lot easier to recycle because you're using paper. So how do you respond to that?
Paper, for example, not all paper can be recycled. Take paper cups, they can't be recycled. Either it's because of the glue, if they're glued together, and most paper cups would be, you can't recycle them. Or they might have a plastic or a wax liner, and then of course you can't recycle them either. So most paper cups do not get recycled. Paper bags, if they're nice and clean, they'll be recycled. But a pizza box, no, you can't recycle it. Mm-hmm. So not everything that comes in paper can be recycled.
What's interesting too is the juice boxes. You know, they say let's get juice boxes, yes, because they're made out of paper. Well, they're covered in plastic too.
They are, and I'm not sure what they're being turned into, because they have, like you say, a lot of plastic and glue. But the reason of course, why we keep them is because there's a deposit built into the price. So we're encouraged, of course, to turn them in.
So what's the biggest threat to your industry right now, Richard? What do you think? Is it government regulation? Are environmentalists putting some pressure on you, a little heat on you? Like, what are you feeling right now?
The biggest pressure in regards to recycling, I don't know if it would be really consumer demand. I would guess it would be interest groups, special interest groups, demanding that that special interest groups would like us to stop making plastic altogether, obviously. But that's a very narrow-minded viewpoint, and I don't think it's widely held. I think most consumers are actually quite happy with the way things are.
Has your business seen maybe a bit of a decline or a little dip over the last few years, as more people are thinking more about the environment, perhaps?
We haven't noticed a dip in our sales, but then again, our major product isn't one-time use plastic either. Most of our plastic that we produce would be for, well, we do a lot of industrial plastic and other plastic.
So bigger businesses and corporations come to you and said, we're thinking of changing our philosophy, our ideology, maybe away from plastics or a different alternative because they want to be more environmentally conscious?
In our industry, we haven't been approached by any larger company to try and convince us to do it. Yeah. We have a market, and we're there to help fill the market, and I just don't see this market as going away.
Now, there's some new studies that say plastic bags are used as fuel, especially in some of the Scandinavian countries like Sweden. Can you talk a bit about that?
That's right. Sweden has 34 electricity generating plants that are fueled by garbage, and a lot of that garbage would be plastic. And the incinerators heat up boilers, and the boilers turn the turbines, and they're producing a fair percentage of electricity just from burning garbage. And of course, the smoke is scrubbed. The smokestacks are scrubbed. There's still some greenhouse gases going up the smokestacks, but probably a lot less than are coming out of the landfills where this garbage was destined to go. And another country that is using incineration and getting energy out of it is Japan.
Richard Friesen, owner of Friesen Plastics, thanks a lot for joining me today on Bridge City News.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.